Today, I am so thrilled to be joined with Richard Parker. Richard Parker is the founder and director of research for the iconic skincare brand RATIONALE. RATIONALE is slowly taking over the world, and rightly so, I say. In fact, Oprah Winfrey have just awarded their Sunscreen #3, the tinted serum, as being the best skincare product in terms of sunscreen. So well done, RATIONALE. It's a real favourite of mine as well. During the podcast today, we have fantastic conversation. Richard shares amazing knowledge and really puts us all on the right path to having glowing skin. He also shares a few secrets about the things he keeps seeing us doing wrong. So let's get into it. Richard, I am so proud and delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Shauna.
So I'd love you to tell our audience who are listening a little bit about your career and your background and how you've got to where you are today, Richard.
Sure. Well, I think like many people who find their way into the skincare industry, I was motivated by my own skin problems. So I had acne. I grew up in the sun. So in my early 20s, I already had quite visible sun damage. So I visited our local dermatologist in Wollongong in New South Wales, a very old man, and basically put the fear of God into me and told me I needed to use this new thing called sunscreen. This is in 1974. This new thing called sunscreen. If I didn't, I would end up with skin cancer and looking very old. And I thought, this is kind of cool what this man's doing. So that was my first introduction to skincare. Then I finished high school. I considered a career in medicine, but really I was more drawn to the wellness space in skincare than the illness space. And dermatology in those days didn't really embrace skin wellness. It's a thing now, but back then it wasn't. So I thought, what is my skill set best suited to? And so I went back to university and I retrained as a cosmetic chemist. So what I do is formulate skincare products. A very big special area of need for me was sunscreens. And then I became involved in a big dermatology project in the early 90s looking at sun damage, and that basically defined my career from then on.
I do think that Australia have done well convincing people probably about sunscreen and skin cancer, but I feel there's such a missing link. Like patients often don't see the connection with aging, and I often wonder, would people be a bit more motivated to wear their SPF every day if they kind of were making more of that connection? So I know that you talk a lot about the 6 pillars of skin health. Can you explain to me what those are and what you mean by that?
Sure. So we now know that 80% of facial aging is caused by the sun. And that means 2 things. It means, firstly, it's in our control. We can do something about it. Secondly, it means we know the cause. It's not a random, some people age poorly compared to others. It really is 80% of it's sun-related. So I thought way back 35 plus years ago, what if we could prevent all this sun damage? So my first job out of college was working with a group of dermatologists who were using CO2 laser to basically vaporize the top layers off the skin, take away all that sun damage. But in doing that, they caused other problems. So the skin's immunity was damaged, and these patients were allergic to everything, including sunscreens, which they desperately needed. So that launched my study of the skin's immune system, the skin's antioxidant system, the skin's solar protection system. And I think of these things as systems. In medicine, we talk about systems in the body, and the skin has its own systems. And they're largely related to environmental protection. Skin is the only organ of the body that needs to deal with the physical environment as its outermost presentation. All the other organs of the body, as you know, are protected. The skin is very vulnerable. So in order to protect ourselves from the sun, we've evolved what I call the 6 systems, or the 6 pillars of skin health. And they are, in the morning, the skin's immune system is very active. That's the first. The second is we have an innate antioxidant system in our skin. And then we have a solar protection system. So they're the first 3 pillars of skin health. So in order to have a healthy skin, we have to have a healthy immune system, we have to have a healthy antioxidant system, we have to have a healthy skin solar protection system. At night, it changes. The skin's nocturnal rhythm looks more at things like barrier restoration. So our barrier repairs at night. pH recalibration is the fifth one. So every night our skin tries to bring its pH back down to a healthy acidic level. And the sixth pillar of skin health is DNA repair. So our skin cells become damaged. They are capable to a certain extent of repairing themselves through this mechanism of DNA repair. The problem that we have, Shauna, is that we have not evolved, our skin systems have not evolved to support us much longer than, say, 35 years of age. So, one of my great interests, I have two great interests in this field. One is in epigenetics, which is the study, as you know, of the influence of the environment on our genetic tendencies. The second is evolutionary biology. So from an evolutionary point of view, our skin has not evolved to protect us much more than, say, about 35. And we're living twice, sometimes three times that now. So we do need help. So we developed these 6 pillars of skin health, 3 in the morning, 3 at night, designed to protect our skin from the sun during the day and repair sun damage at night.
Okay. And so how did you discover these, or what was it that made you pull this all together? Because the way you explain it is so good.
Well, just looking at skin in its state of optimal health. In medicine, we tend to study disease states, and there often, alarmingly or surprisingly, isn't a correlation to look back at what is the body doing when it's in a healthy state. We just look at a pathology and then develop a treatment around that instead of sometimes looking back and thinking, well, how does the body deal with this naturally? What went wrong? And skin is very much like that. We can see if what we're doing is working or not working with skin. And so way back in the early days when I was working with sun damaged patients and trying to treat them with lasers and various things, we saw the laser could definitely remove the damaged tissue, but the basic mechanisms of how to maintain skin health were still not there. And I realized we need to supplement these things. Now, supplementation is now quite a commonly held theory about human health. So, we take supplements for our brain or our kidneys or our liver or hormone replacement. All of these things are looking to put back what was there and is now not there. So my theory was that let's look at the skin in a state of optimal health. Oh, okay, so the skin has an immune system that revolves around B group vitamins. The skin has an antioxidant system, and that revolves around vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, and so on. And then we have a solar protection system, which revolves around melanin, the amount of pigment we have in our skin, and our skin's barrier function. And in sun-damaged patients, all of those things are compromised. So I thought, what if we could create a system for human skin health that supplemented topically each of these things? Now, there's a lot of talk today about, taking collagen supplements and so on to enhance skin health, but the skin's a pretty direct organism. So the best way to treat the skin, and as we know in dermatology, is through the skin. So the idea of supplementing topically became, I guess, the foundation of what we now call the Essential Six.
I think that's really important. I often have patients ask me, well, can't I just take some vitamin B? Yeah. Can I just take a tablet? And I always explain, unfortunately, our bodies don't really give generously to the skin.
No.
And we don't prioritize, our body doesn't prioritize the skin as an organ like it would our kidney or our heart or our brain. And I often say to patients, if you think about it, if your heart physically aged in looks like your skin on your face did, we'd probably be in a lot of trouble.
We would.
And the reality is that's why we kind of have to feed our skin directly. Is that right?
Yes. And I think that, the skin is the only organ that has to deal with this external threat to its health. And as we become more prosperous and we're living longer, we're living more outdoors than ever.
Yeah.
So the challenge is doubly.
And so I know that you've been on quite a journey, and RATIONALE, your incredible company, is very much at the forefront of research. What would you say is the most sort of powerful or most exciting discovery that you've made in your career?
I think there are two. The first discovery is that 80% of facial aging is caused by the sun. And that's a message I think that's very empowering, because it means it's in your hands. The most important thing is don't get burned. If you're a parent, don't let your children get burnt, because we know the number of sunburns correlates to how we're going to age, but also skin cancer. So I think that message of 80% of facial aging is preventable if we do all the right things and don't do the wrong things. The second one is another important area of research for RATIONALE, and that is what's called epigenetics. So we know that we have our genetic code that we inherit from both parents, and that influences many areas of our health and happiness today. For example, mental health, there is a genetic component we know. It's certainly cardiac disease and so on. So epigenetics has changed the way we see that genetic code. When I was a student, we were taught your genetic code is immutable, you can't change it, whatever is in your genetic code will be expressed. Now we know different. So we know that if we do the right things and stop doing the wrong things, that tendency might not be expressed. For example, I come from a family of 7, and all of my siblings have had and both my parents have had multiple skin cancers removed. I've been doing what I've done since I was my early 20s. I haven't had a single skin cancer, nothing. Never happened. And I mean, that's a sample of one, but it is relevant because I think this whole thing about taking it into your own hands. So epigenetics means if we protect our skin immune system, use antioxidants, use a sunscreen every day and so on, follow those 6 principles of skin health, the chances of negative expression of genes like skin cancer or premature photoaging and so on are greatly diminished, enormous. And I think that's a message of hope. I think it's the one thing I hope I've contributed to the medical literature over the years is that skin health is very much in our own hands.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really interesting study that they did in Massachusetts about 6 years ago, and they used some erbium and CO2 laser on skin, and they divided a group of men who'd had non-melanoma skin cancers into 2 groups, and one got treated with laser to kind of reboot the skin and the other didn't, and then they followed them for the next 6 years. And it was very interesting because the group who were treated with that laser actually had 50% less non-melanoma skin cancers. Yeah. And so I think what it does say is that actually the health of the skin and the skin cells actually can be improved by external forces as well, which is so interesting.
And encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that interest in skincare and skin is just through the roof. I actually looked at the Google Trends and it is something like quadrupled in 10 years, the number of searches.
Yes.
What would you say the most common myth is that's out there about skin? Because I think there's lots of noise in this space.
I think the biggest myth, biggest misconception with skincare is that none of it makes any difference. Yeah. You know, you have the total believers and you have the total skeptics. And I think the truth, as always, is somewhere in between. So the reality is that, you know, we can influence our skin health. We are no longer victims of our skin genetics. You know, someone like you is very fair, you know, blue eyes, and someone comes from the Northern Hemisphere, you naturally have a tendency to not handle the sun as well as someone who's got a darker skin, who was born in a climate that is evolved to deal with that level of sun. But because of your medical knowledge and your interest in this field, you're far more motivated to do the right things, which is protect your skin from the sun, repair any sun damage at night. And because you do those things, you have great skin. So I think the biggest misconception is that we can't change what we're born with our skin, and we're destined to look like our mother and father.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is that people often who maybe have bought skincare off the shelf with no guidance, understandably probably have been disappointed or underwhelmed, or maybe they've jumped in a little bit too hard.
Yes.
And the next thing you know, they've used some very strong vitamin C, they've got a red face, or they've jumped in with a vitamin A, and then they decide that they're allergic to that.
Yes.
You know, I can't have that, I'm allergic to it. And I often say, yeah, it's highly unlikely that you're actually allergic to it. I think you probably just jumped in a little bit too hard.
Exactly.
And so it is definitely, I think, I would kind of love to see skincare be a little bit more nearly medicalized, where guidance from a doctor or a nurse or you know, really well qualified dermal clinicians, because I don't know whether you saw the scenes with the Sephora kids thing.
Oh, yes.
8-year-olds getting vitamin A, you know, it's absolutely crazy. And I just think, but the reality is that the power of influencers to get kids to buy things that kind of at best are not going to help them and at worst are going to damage their skin.
Yes.
It's a bit scary, really.
Yes.
And I think parents are quite pressured into, well, everyone else has got it. And I mean, I'm in my late 40s, but I have to say when I was a child, like skincare was definitely not a thing for children. And it was kind of barely a thing for adults either.
Yes.
You know, it was kind of really an exclusive for well-off people. And definitely it was the last thing that anyone who didn't have money thought of. So it is amazing how it's evolved over a very short period of time.
Yes. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I think every parent wants the best for their child. And so if you're concerned about your child's health, you know, we've been conditioned over the last 30 years in Australia that, you know, it's akin to child abuse to let your child get sunburned, for example. And we have all these regulations around no hat, no play, no sunscreen, no play. Children are really not allowed outside during school hours in the sunshine unless they're adequately protected. And I think this is an extension of that. Well, if that's good, maybe I should let my child, you know, use some skincare. But I always say to parents, look, if a child's healthy, they're not broken. There's nothing to fix. You know, if you prevent your child getting sunburned, put a sunscreen on them. If there's a chance that they might get burned, for example, playing sport or at the beach, then that's about all you really need to do, unless there's a problem, and that's why we have doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. We've jumped into sunscreen there, and I have to say, I have to congratulate you on your sunscreens. They're amazing. I have to say, so many patients still think of zinc-based sunscreens as being some kind of red stripy thing that they put on their face at sports day. And whenever I introduce them to, you know, number 3, the tinted serum and things, they're like, I can't believe this is sunscreen. And I'm very passionate about, I would say to patients, I actually don't mind what's in sunscreen you wear as long as you wear one, but I want to help you find one you love.
Yes.
Because I want you to want to put it on your face, because it's the most important thing you can do. And obviously I've got lots of patients come to see me for injectables and lasers and all sorts of things, and it can be a source of frustration when I can't convince people, please wear your sunscreen. But we use, and I know that you guys use the skin analysis, and when people see that damage on their face, and I have to say, when they particularly see the driver's side of their face, and they're like,
it's shocking.
Whoa. And I'm like, yep. And they're like, I didn't know that I could get sunburned in the car and I could get sun damage.
Or by the window.
Yeah, and I think people are driving along with their aircon on and it feels nice and cool in the car, but they're like literally cooking that side of their face. So I would love to know how you discovered and created such a glorious thing to put on your face.
Well, it goes way back 35 years to that early study I was involved with when we were trying to help people with severe sun damage who'd had laser and were allergic to virtually every skincare product we put on their skin. We now know that, you know, we went too hard with the lasers back in those days. We can get just as good results by dialing the settings down, doing multiple treatments rather than one very aggressive session. Also, the role of skincare is enormous. And today we can get results with skincare over time that equate to what we would have done with a laser 30 years ago. But it takes time and effort and investment of people's time and money. So way back then, I discovered the only sunscreen that every patient in that trial could tolerate was zinc. But back then, zinc was, as you say, a white paste that you only ever saw on lifeguards at the beach. And nobody in their right mind would want to wear that every day. So way back 35 years ago, I made a promise to myself, one day I will make a zinc sunscreen that everybody loves to use. And dermatologists often say the best sunscreen is the one patients love to use. I know you say that to your patients too. Just use whatever you love. What we've done over those 3 decades, Shauna, is that we've refined the zinc oxide process. So zinc oxide is a large white particle. And if we manipulate the particle size, so use various particle sizes of zinc oxide, we can block the sun while creating transparency as well. So it's a very, the physics of this is very complex, but essentially if you think about a tennis ball, a ping pong ball, the head of a pin, all of these various size spheres, we have all of that happening in the correct ratio. So the product makes the skin look beautiful, it's translucent, and it gives you complete protection through UVA, UVB, visible light, and infrared, all of the sun's energy.
And is your feeling like, I have to say, I direct people towards a physical sunscreen because I find like my rosaceas and my acne seem to get worse with what I call a chemical sunscreen. Is that the way you think sunscreen is going to go?
Well, I think it's certainly zinc oxide is the only sunscreen I like to formulate with. It has a very, very long history. The ancient Egyptians were using metallic oxides as sunscreens thousands of years ago. So we have a long history of safety with zinc oxide. I think it's still used as the gold standard in nappy rash, for example. We treat babies with it. And I love zinc because it's very rare. I've, in my whole career, never seen one case of contact dermatitis or allergic reaction to zinc oxide. And I think that speaks a lot. The new sunscreen chemicals are very powerful, and we know what happens if we don't use them. We're going to get skin cancer, we're going to look old. But I do have questions around the long-term use of any new drug. You know, we need decades before we truly know what we're talking about here. I love zinc oxide because it is an antioxidant in itself. It is also an anti-inflammatory agent, and it's unique. It has that unique profile among sunscreen filters that no other sunscreen has.
And what is the thinking? I noticed that your sunscreens all are tinted.
Yes.
And I know some people get a little bit anxious, particularly our male patients.
Yes.
But like my husband wears number 3, the tinted. Like it
So does mine.
It doesn't look like you're wearing makeup or anything. But what's the thinking behind the tint in it?
Yes, sure. So zinc, as you know, is white, and it can be white on the skin. When we add iron oxides, it does two things. It negates that white cast the sunscreen throws, but it also extends the sun protection factor. So the sun's energy is only 7%. The sun's energy is ultraviolet radiation. We all know about UV. But beyond that, a huge percentage of the sun's energy is what we call visible light, which we can see. And then we have infrared radiation, which we can feel as heat. And they all contribute to skin aging and skin cancer too. The problem we have is that conventional sunscreens don't block visible light or infrared. That's where iron oxides come in, because they extend into through the UV into visible light and infrared protection. So that's the thinking around iron oxides in the number 3 tinted serum.
Okay, amazing. And so, Richard, obviously you've had this amazing career interacting with people for years about their skin. And I know we've talked about a few of the things that people omit, but are there any other common mistakes that you see people making over and over again with their skin?
I think the most distressing thing I find is the trial and error that people go through with their skin. You know, people seem happy to tinker with their skin in a way that they wouldn't do with other organs in their body. You know, we don't go tinkering with our livers or our kidneys trying to change their function, or let me try this and see what happens. And yet with our skin, it seems to be fair game to try to do either nothing or to do too much or to experiment with things. And I think the parameters are there. We know what healthy skin needs. It's those 6 pillars of skin health. So I think that the thing that frustrates me most of all is if people just went and had a medical skin consultation, they would take all that guesswork out of it, you know, and things that people put up with like acne and rosacea you mentioned earlier and so on. These are all treatable conditions today, and often treatable in a very non-traumatic, no risk sort of scenario. So I just wish that people would trust medical professionals with their skin and stop experimenting.
I agree. And I think the other thing that is, it's actually the impact on confidence and actually mental health of skin conditions. And I actually read this interesting study recently where they went into like a nursing aged care facility in Japan, and they went back through the patient's notes and also took some history. And when they looked, that people in that nursing home who were in their 80s and 90s had a greater risk of depression in their 80s and 90s if they'd had acne all those years before. Really? So the impact of skin conditions, it actually goes on for a long time. And even when I know you'll probably have had the same, so many patients will say to me, there might be a 50-year-old woman or a 60, she'll say, I've never had good skin. And you're kind of looking at them and you think, doesn't look too bad. But actually in their mind, there's still this 20-year-old who had post-adolescent acne, and they've labeled themselves as having bad skin.
Yes.
And they feel that that is just this label that they drag with themselves forever.
Yes.
And I think, you know, people don't really understand that actually not having great skin just absolutely ruins people's self-esteem.
It does.
And I know I've personally had a bit of a flare in my skin in the last few weeks, and I've hated it. It's made me feel awful.
Yes.
Because I've been like, like, what is wrong with my
I
skin?
think this link is now very well established. You know, we talk about a new field of dermatoendocrinology, so looking at the effects of hormones on skin health. And it's definitely a cyclical thing. You know, when your skin's healthy, you're happier. And we can measure that now. You produce the happiness hormones. When your skin's not good, the opposite happens and we feel depressed. You know, and I often look at people with sun damage and they have a fatalism about them. It's almost like life's over or the best years are over and so on. And when you fix their skin, they are happier. You know, my childhood piano teacher, who's now 95, in her late 80s, and she had been a big sun worshipper, asked me if we could do anything for her skin. And, you know, she was quite down about aging and life and so on. And over a period of 3 to 5 years, we fixed her skin and she's such a happy person now, as she herself expresses that. So I think there's really something to what you're saying, Shauna. I think that the link between skin health and mood and happiness and hormones that regulate those things is the new frontier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people shouldn't feel guilty for wanting to do it. I think sometimes people feel like it's a little bit vain or, you know, gosh, are people going to judge them, or I'm too old to be worrying about this. But when you see how great they feel afterwards, it's just transformative. I'll have to show you some photos we did.
Yes, please.
Some patients later who we did a photo shoot with, and they were so confident.
Yes.
So the skincare market is so saturated, as we've talked about. And I think people do feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
I didn't grow up in a family who, my mum was a real makeup-free lady. My dad idolized her for being naturally beautiful.
Yes.
I think once a year she got a bottle of oil of Olay. And for Christmas, that was it. I made the mistake of one time putting that pink liquid on my face and paid for it. But certainly wasn't able to hide that because I was bright red. But what I think is that a lot of us feel a bit overwhelmed. Where do you start? You go into some of these big shops. There's endless choice. It all feels a little bit overwhelming. I would love you to tell me why you think I think RATIONALE should be the choice. I'm a massive fan. But why do you think RATIONALE should be the choice? And what do you think is different about you guys?
I think RATIONALE is the only skincare range in the world that's exclusively focused on the major cause of skin aging, which is the sun. You know, up until now, we've just had sunscreens, but 30 plus years ago, we knew that immune boosters were important. Big study at Sydney University in the 90s showed that topical vitamin B3 prevented photoaging, prevented skin cancer. We know that vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, all of these things topically prevent oxidation of skin lipids and so on. We know the importance of sunscreens. So I think we've evolved our understanding of sun protection and sun repair of sun damage in a way that no other skincare company has. So, and I know this because for many years I would lecture at medical conferences in America. People would say, oh, you're Australian, you know more about this than we do. And I thought, yeah, we actually do, because through necessity, doctors like you have had to learn how to address the effects of the sun on human skin. It's not the same in countries like Norway, Sweden, or even North America in the northern parts. So I think we have this, RATIONALE has this unique and very considered approach to the major cause of skin aging, which is the sun. So if you protect your skin during the day, and that goes beyond sunscreens to include things like immune boosters, antioxidants, and you repair sun damage at night, and that includes, but it's not restricted to, vitamin A, hydroxy acids, for example, barrier repair limits. If you do those things, you can have great skin. So I think our unique focus on sun and sun damage, preventing it, repairing it, is what has made us a global leader in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's quite interesting is that obviously people who are based in Australia do love to support an Australian brand. They like to support Australian made. But I think I always say it's a step further than that. It's been made for here.
Yes.
And there's nowhere really more extreme than here. And it was one of the first things I noticed. I moved to Australia 11 years ago. And I have to say, both Peter and I very quickly noticed, sorry to say this to our Australian listeners, but people looked a bit older than their chronological age.
Yes.
And it was quite noticeable. It was something we picked up within a few months. We're like, gosh, everyone looks quite old. And that's the unfortunate truth, is that we're seeing signs of aging that you would see a decade later in European skin.
Yes.
So I think using a brand that's sort of been based here and done its homework here is kind of makes sense. Now, there's lots of beauty trends. Some of them are horrendous.
Yes.
Some of them are exciting. And some of them are somewhere in between. What's one beauty trend that you would like to never see again, Richard?
Make your own sunscreen in the kitchen.
Oh, I don't even know about that one.
Have a look on YouTube. It is scary. So people are showing you how to, you take some olive oil and I think it's some zinc oxide powder and you shake it and that's a natural sunscreen. That is one that absolutely, except it's so popular, you know.
Oh my goodness, I missed that one.
Oh, it's really a rabbit hole that you will go down when you start looking at people's.
My patients must be too scared of me to tell me that one.
Oh, it's crazy, and you know, demonizing sunscreens. I think that's a trend that I really, really hate because we know what happens when we don't use them. We know what happens when we continually get sunburnt and don't protect our skin. So. I think, make your own sunscreen or don't use sunscreen, calling sunscreens toxins and poisons. And this sort of trend, I think, is something I wish would just go away forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's definitely some thinking around sunscreens and the reefs and the barrier reefs. And I think using a zinc-based sunscreen seems to be a much more of a safer option for wildlife.
For the environment.
So again, that's another great reason why people should do that. Another one I get asked, and I have to say my 15-year-old daughter asks me about this one. I don't even know how to say it. Is it a gisha or a one of these sort of
facial rollers?
Yes, a gisha thing. It's like a sort of shaped stone.
It's made of stone.
Yeah. I mean, does that do anything?
Look, the skin on the face is very, very, it's fragile and it doesn't have a lot of adhesion points to the skull. So our skin on the face is very, very prone to stretching and to laxity. So I think anything that pulls at the face, it's not going to do anything to help your skin. So it's not going to firm your skin. It's not going to tighten. And I think that continual pulling at the skin could potentially increase skin laxness, which is what we're all trying to avoid. So it doesn't make any sense scientifically to me.
No, and I have to say, like the skin rollers, they're supposed to, I mean, one, after you would roll it on your face once, then surely the next time, if you're just chucking it in a drawer, it couldn't be super hygienic to be rolling it up and on your face either. And certainly I'm a big fan of microneedling and done well. It can make a
medical procedures.
But that's completely different. And sometimes people will say, oh, I just have a little roller that I use at home. And I think,
I think everyone wants to believe that there's a safer way to do things. But you know, when you look at things like sun damage, that's a medical condition. You know, you're talking about pathology of skin cells, potential to develop skin cancers, changes in the skin's connective tissues like collagen and elastin. You know, these are quite radical changes that occur. And I think we need to address the fact that sometimes, you know, more aggressive measures are needed to repair sun damage than people would like to admit, and everyone wants to think of a safer option. And of course, skincare should always be the first starting point because it's those things you do every day that make the most difference. But I think trying to simulate, you know, I've seen like topical Botox creams. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. You know, these things you have to inject into the muscle to get at a very precise point, as you know, to get the effect. It's not viable to think that a cream could do the same way, but I think people want to believe there's a safer, more natural, in inverted commas, version. But, you know, it's not that way.
We've talked a lot about social media and the impact with children. What do you think about the fact that social media has educated people about skincare? Do you think that there have been advantages to sort of the growth of skin and skincare on social media? It's
interesting because you have the whole spectrum in the social media world. You have people who literally know nothing about it, but it doesn't stop them having opinions and giving advice. Then you have doctors, you know, dermatologists, cosmetic physicians and so on, giving medical advice. And I think the spectrum is very, very wide. And unfortunately on social media today, we have the, I guess the belief that, you know, your ignorance is equal to my medical degree, you know, and that's very annoying and I think harmful, and I wish there was more regulation of it. But on the flip side, we have dermatologists, doctors coming out telling people, you know, how to look after their skin, which I think is a great thing.
And sometimes patients will ask me, you know, what's the difference between X brand that I can buy for $15 versus, what we would call a cosmeceutical or a more medical grade skincare. And I will talk to things like the transport mechanism.
Absolutely.
So I usually say to people that it's all very well to have the bus driver, but if he doesn't have a bus, then he isn't going anywhere. And I just wonder whether you could talk to that, because I know that does create a lot of expense when you're creating good skincare. It's a lot of those hidden ingredients. So it's not just the vitamin C or the vitamin A, it's the other bits.
No. The active ingredients in skincare products are like the ingredients to make a cake, for example. But how the cake is made is the difference between a home cook and a professional chef, for example. And we all know which one we'd rather eat. So I think this whole thing around comparing active ingredients is not the right way to look at choosing a skincare product. You can buy very cheap vitamin C serums and very expensive ones. The difference is the science. And I can't speak for other brands, but I know with RATIONALE, we spend millions of dollars a year in genetic testing, for example. So we look at which genes are up and down regulated when you use our formulations. And that's important because we need to be able to talk to patients, consumers, and say, this is the difference. We can verify exactly what's happening. Your skin looks better, that's great. But here's the genetic reason that has happened. We need to do an enormous amount of safety data. The delivery systems you talked about earlier, the way that we deliver the active ingredients to where they go in the skin is critical to how effective and how safe they are too. So I think that it's important for people to realize it is a difference. It's not just a vanity thing. You're not spending more and getting the same as you get when you buy a $10, $15 product. There really is no comparison between cheaper products that claim to have the same ingredients and RATIONALE.
And just talking to that point, I do also see patients quite focused on what percentage of vitamin A and what's the percentage of vitamin A, and people seem to be quite fixated on that. Could you explain to our listeners why actually that percentage is probably not just quite as relevant as they think, and there's other issues at hand?
Exactly. Look, people have this belief, I think sometimes, especially if they start to read, and people are getting more interested. So we need to have all the answers for our patients because they do come with valid questions and they've read a little bit. But a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing sometimes. And this belief that, the higher the concentration, the better. That's not the case. We need to look at the concentrations that ingredients are found in human skin, and that's how we get efficacy without irritancy. Vitamin C is a perfect example. So there's this race at the moment about my C is bigger than your C. We've got 20% vitamin C, and I look and these people have got red, angry looking skin because it's not about that. Vitamin C does not exist in isolation in human skin. It's found with a whole group of other antioxidants like vitamin E that has an anti-inflammatory effect, vitamin A, which has a cellular repairing mechanism. All of these things need to be in the same concentrations that they're found in human skin to achieve efficacy without irritancy. And that's the difference. People just saying, this one has more, so it must be better. That's a recipe for skin irritation to me, Shauna. I think it's much more complex than that, and more is not necessarily better. I use the example of fitness. If you go to a personal trainer, you've never been to a trainer before, you're not terribly fit, and you say, crunches are good, I'll do 500 crunches. You'll be in so much pain, you never go back, you think exercise is a terrible thing. It's what is right for you, and that's the skill of a physician, a dermal therapist, a nurse who is medically trained in looking at skin and thinking, this is what you need right now. And it's a moving target. Skin changes through the decades of life, and that's why you need to have a long-term advocate, someone who's looking after your skin, helping you navigate those waters so that you get through life looking beautiful at any age. I always say we can't look young forever, but a woman can be beautiful at any age.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I see people maybe making a mistake is they're using multiple products across lots of different ranges. And when I have a look and I'm thinking, there's vitamin C in that one, and there's vitamin C in that one, and there's vitamin C in that one, and look, there's vitamin C. And I'm thinking, and they've got really red, inflamed, barrier impaired face. And I'm thinking, okay, that they unknowingly are just repeatedly putting the same ingredient on top, on top, on top.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, I had a patient probably about 3 months ago, and she had a 17-step morning routine.
Goodness.
And a 19-step evening routine. And then she was like, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do this. And then I was just like,
too complicated.
Whoa. And the thing is that she didn't have good skin.
No.
Which is why she couldn't see it. And this poor woman had spent a fortune.
Yes.
She literally had a backpack full of stuff. And so sometimes I think less is more.
Yes.
And I know that we obviously have the essential 6 with Rationale, but sometimes everyone doesn't get 6 at the beginning. Sometimes you get 3.
Yeah.
You know, you might get a cleanser. It just depends. It has to be very personalized. Yes. You're not gonna walk in the door and walk out with 6 products every time, or 1 to 6, because you just might not be ready for that at all. And as you say, it's not very many people that we do that with straight off the bat.
Yes. It's like coming back to the exercise analogy. If you go to a trainer, you recognize the trainer is an expert. He knows what he's talking about, and you want to be fit. But then that person's job is to assess where you're at in that fitness spectrum. So if you're a 70-year-old that's completely unfit, that's going to look very different to a 22-year-old athlete. You know, so I think it's the skill in this area is looking at the patient where they are in their life journey and then giving them exactly what they need and working towards building up, you know, those 6 pillars of skin health. It's like, you know, if you want to be fit, you need a little bit of aerobic fitness, you need some flexibility, you need some strength training and so on. It's the same with your skin, but you can't hit it so hard in the beginning that people have a terrible experience. It's like, let's build up your skin's immunity first. And that's it, the solid basis to moving on to antioxidants. And of course, you need a sunscreen right from the beginning. And, you know, it's nuanced and it's complicated and it takes time and it's very much relationship based.
And I think the other thing that you're pointing out is it's very bespoke as well. And just because your sister or your neighbor uses X, Y, and Z, that may be an absolute disaster for you to go down that route because that's not what you need.
No.
And I also love we do a lot of photography and a lot of skin analysis, repetitive. And it's just lovely watching that very objective measure that the person's skin is improving. And it's lovely for them to see. And when you look at yourself every day, you forget what you look like. And then often we show them the pictures and say, well, that was you when we met you in December and this is you today. And they're like, whoa. And they're like, can you email me those photos? I want to show my husband, because when people look at themselves every day, they kind of forget.
Yes, they do. And it's, you know, how we look is a very, very good indicator of whether what we're doing is working. You know, the wonderful thing about skin is that you can see if what you're doing is working. And that's why I think patients love the before and after photos.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rationale is pretty famous for the Rationale glow. I have to say, patients of any skincare range, they will come back and say, I've never had a compliment about my skin ever. And people are asking me what I've done. And I have to say, if you're someone who's had rosacea or acne and another person asks you for advice or says, what are you using? Gosh, you feel 10 foot tall.
You do.
Are you going to tell us what the secret is of the Rationale glow?
I think it's having healthy skin. You know, it doesn't matter why people go and see a doctor about their skin, whether it's because they've got a skin problem or they just want to look better. I think they're flip sides of the same coin. But I think healthy skin is beautiful skin. And beautiful skin's healthy. So I think that glow that we talk about is just restoring that natural health and beauty to the skin that was probably always there when you were a child. Over a lifetime of sun exposure, it dissipates, it disappears, and then we're able to bring it back, which is a beautiful thing.
One of the things I love about Rationale is it seems to always be evolving. And sometimes you have a product that the patients love, but clearly you are really driven by the science. And even though in ways as a business, maybe it's a bit of a risky decision to pull something that people love to buy. But I kind of love that you go with your ethics of saying, but I know that there's now something better. Is that a sort of stressful thing to do in business?
It is stressful because we have to ask our patients to trust us. And they do, which is wonderful because we've proven ourselves and they know that we won't make a change unless it's going to benefit them and they can see an improvement in their skin. So I think, as you know, Shauna, medical research never stops, you know, and we're constantly nuancing and refining what we're doing. We were talking about HRT before and how that's now becoming much more the interest in HRT is now enormous again. And I think that never ends. And we always want to bring the best to our clients. So you can never rest on your laurels. But if we didn't have that trust from our clients, I think they wouldn't thank us for changing the formulas. But because we've been doing this for 3+ decades, because we've helped tens of thousands of people around the world have better skin, they know that we're not going to change anything unless it's for their benefit.
So, Richard, we have a lot of listeners in the US, and very excitedly that you have launched RATIONALE now in the US. I'd love to know how that's going.
Well, it's wonderful. So when we were there about 6 weeks ago, our plane landed in LA, my phone rang, and it was our office telling me that we had won the Oprah Winfrey Sun Award for Best Serum Sunscreen.
Oh,
it's amazing. So Oprah was invited by the American Academy of Dermatology to give an award to the new novel sunscreen technologies to raise awareness for melanoma. So we won Best Serum Sunscreen for our number 3 tinted serum, SPF 50+, and that's just a sign of how brilliantly everything's going in the US for RATIONALE.
That's amazing. So you've only been there for 18 months?
We have, only a year and a half, and our message of solar protection and repair is really resonating. Americans have a lot of fair skin people in their population. They have a lot of sun and a lot of sun damage, so they're very responsive to our message. Solar protection, solar repair, unique focus, take care of skin aging and skin health and beauty all at the same time.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. I'm also a big Oprah fan.
Yes.
So that is so cool.
She's so influential in America, and she was wonderful in that she didn't choose the winners. She engaged 5 leading dermatologists to assess the formulations, and we're just so thrilled and honored that we've won. And of course, sales have gone through the roof.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, she's my guru. I want to be like her. She's just the best communicator, I think. So Richard, I'm sure that we've got everyone fired up who's been listening. So maybe you could explain to people how they can find RATIONALE.
I think the easiest way for people to engage and learn about RATIONALE is just go into rationale.com. Now, that being said, we want you to get the best advice. So if you have a medical skin condition, please go and have a look at our medical stockists, and they'll tell you where you should go to see a doctor about your skin. So that's important if you have acne, rosacea and so on, or if you're interested in anti-aging technologies like injectables or lasers and so on, you need to go and look at our medical agency stockists in Australia and in the United States. You can also engage with us in our own flagship stores. You can also engage with us at some of our specialty retailers. In Australia, we have David Jones and so on. But all of the parts of the RATIONALE network are connected. For example, we refer patients from online to see a doctor, one of our doctors if necessary. We refer people, doctors refer people to come and see us if they're looking for a beautiful facial experience and so on. So it's a very tightly knit network where people can find the answers to their skin concerns and have great skin their whole life.
And so where's next?
Oh, I think possibly the UK and Europe. Europeans are slower catching on to this whole sun protection repair message. And I think they'll respond very well to our message. The United States is our immediate focus. So it's such a big country. It's such a crowded and noisy market. But our message of solar protection and repair is really resonating there.
Well, obviously, if you won Oprah's award, that's pretty awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you, Shauna.
Richard, you have been so generous. I'm nearly at the end of my questions. You'll be glad to know the grilling's nearly over. What are 3 things that you wish people knew about their skin or skincare?
Sure. I think the first thing is I wish people knew how much of an influence the amount of sun they have has on their skin. So 80% of aging is caused by the sun. That's the first thing I wish people knew, because that means it's in your hands. You don't have to get sunburned. You can use sunscreen every day. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is that you don't have to be a victim of your genetic code. So when I was a student, we were taught you can't change your genetic code. What happened to your parents is going to happen to you. With skin, that's not so. So we have this epigenetic code above. It's like a series of on-off switches. And whatever happened to your parents, if you do the right things and don't do the wrong things, that switch might not get activated. So like me, you might come from a big skin cancer family, but if you do the right things, that gene isn't expressed. So I wish people would also know that they have control. Their skin health is in their hands. The third thing is that I wish people knew that there are things that work. But the pathway to find out what works involves some work on your part. You do need to see a medical professional. You need to see someone who knows the human body and knows the human skin and can work out where you're at in your life and in your skin journey and prescribe the right products and the right treatments for you at that stage of your life.
Brilliant, Richard. Do we know why so many people have impaired skin barriers? It's to be something that is more and more of an issue. Do we have an idea of why that is?
We do. The sun interferes with your skin barrier. So the lipids that keep our skin hydrated and supple, they oxidize in the sun. Also doing the wrong things impairs the skin barrier a lot. So scrubbing at your face with soap, water, harsh cleansers, using harsh toners, putting alcohol on our skin, all of those things remove the natural protection of the skin, which damages the skin's microbiome as well. So I think making sure that whatever we do with our skin is gentle, making sure that we understand exactly what we're using that particular product for, following directions, making sure that we're doing things in the right way. If you do all those things, we can actually repair the skin barrier, which is the key to healthy skin for life.
Amazing. Do you have any secrets that you can share with us? What's coming next, or are you not allowed to say?
Look, I think, as our journey continues, I'm very interested in what people do with their skin, apart from using skincare products. Now, makeup's a typical example for me. So skincare companies put a lot of bad things in makeup products because they know women don't read the labels the way they will with, say, a skincare product. So color cosmetics for me have the potential to do good or evil. Everything you put on your skin is going to influence your skin health for good or for bad. So it's a next area of exploration for me is looking at color cosmetics and what can we do? Is this a problem? How do we help our clients who have great skin using RATIONALE and then say, well, what makeup should I use? Or, is this foundation I'm using, is that good for my skin? I want to have the answers to those questions.
Richard, one of the things that I noticed when I first met with your team and started looking at RATIONALE, and I have to admit I was a little nervous. It was a lovely scent from it. I could smell a nice smell, but I was scared as someone who has very sensitive skin.
Yes.
But yet I can use RATIONALE, which amazes me. So what's the secret behind that you can actually have this lovely smelling product, but for someone like me, it's not like stinging or burning?
No. So the fragrance that is in the RATIONALE products actually comes from botanical extracts. So Australian plants are very resistant to solar damage. So the plant extracts have these unique, herbaceous and very pleasant fragrances to them, but they're not synthetic perfumes. They're actually natural compounds, and that's what you're smelling in RATIONALE. And these are actually topical anti-inflammatory agents, so they reduce inflammation in the skin and, of course, don't cause sensitivity or adverse reactions.
I'm just having visions of you like creeping around, like looking for all these plants that you can put in your next formulation. Okay, I promise you this is our last question. We always ask everyone who comes on the podcast this question. So what piece of advice would you give your 20-something self if you could?
Protect my skin from the sun every single day and repair sun damage at night.
Awesome. Richard, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Shauna. Thank you.
I think you'll agree we've had some incredible guests on the podcast already, and today's was no exception. I think there is so many nuggets of information I'd love to get out there. So if you know someone who would benefit from the podcast, please share it. That way more people can learn all about themselves. Remember, this podcast is all about you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.